The letter arrived on a scorching July morning in 1923, its envelope bearing the elegant letterhead of Morrison and Associates legal firm. Clara Thompson wiped the sweat from her brow as she tore open the seal, expecting another notice about overdue property taxes on the struggling wildfire ranch in Montana. Instead, the words that stared back at her would shatter everything she thought she knew about her identity. Estate settlement of Benjamin Caldwell, biological father documentation required for twin sister Sarah Elizabeth Caldwell, ... Clara. Read the sentence 3 times before her knees buckled. Twin sister. The phrase echoed in her mind like thunder across the Montana plains. She had spent 23 years believing she was an orphan, alone in the world except for the kindness of strangers who had taken her in. But the legal document in her trembling hands suggested a truth so impossible she could barely comprehend. Someone, somewhere, shared her blood. Someone who might have her same stubborn chin, her same green eyes, her same desperate longing for family that had driven every decision of her adult life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Chicago, 1903. 20 years earlier. In the soot-stained tenements of Chicago's South Side, 5-year-old Clara Caldwell pressed her small face against the grimy window of their third-floor apartment, watching horse-drawn carriages navigate the muddy streets below. Beside her, mirror image and everything except the small birthmark on her left shoulder, her twin sister Sarah traced letters in the condensation on the glass. Clara, Sarah spelled out carefully, her breath fogging the window. That's you. Clara replied, completing their daily ritual. That's you. The twins had developed their own secret language over their 5 years together, a mixture of whispered words and intuitive understanding that their father, Benjamin Caldwell, found increasingly unsettling. When one twin cried, the other felt tears without knowing why. When Clara scraped her knee in the courtyard, Sarah would limp in sympathy upstairs. Their connection was so profound that neighbors in the tenement building often remarked it was like watching one soul split between 2 bodies. Benjamin Caldwell was a man destroyed by circumstances beyond his control. The factory where he had worked for 8 years had closed permanently when the owners moved operations to Pennsylvania, leaving him without income and with 2 daughters to feed. His wife, Margaret, had died giving birth to the twins, leaving him to navigate parenthood, alone while struggling with grief that had never properly healed. The twins remembered their father as a giant of a man with calloused hands and eyes that held perpetual sadness. He would return from his daily searches for employment with shoulders increasingly bent by defeat, often carrying small treasures he had found or traded for the girls, a ribbon for their hair, a shared piece of hard candy, sometimes a picture book with torn pages that he would read to them by candlelight. Tell us about Mama, Sarah would beg during these evening rituals, curled against her father's side while Clara arranged herself on his other arm. Benjamin's voice would soften as he described Margaret's laugh, her talent for making something special from the simplest ingredients, her dreams of a house with a garden where she could grow flowers just for their beauty. The twins would listen with rapt attention, trying to imagine the mother they had never known, but whose absence shaped every aspect of their daily existence. She wanted you girls to have opportunities, Benjamin would say, his voice thick with emotion. She made me promise that no matter what happened, I would find a way for you to have better lives than what Chicago could offer. The promise had seemed theoretical during those early years when the 3 of them managed to survive through Benjamin's odd jobs, charity from neighbors, and the twins' remarkable ability to entertain themselves with imagination and each other's company. Clara and Sarah created elaborate games using discarded buttons and string, built castles from empty tin cans, and told each other stories that transported them far from their cramped, cold apartment. Their bond was so complete that other children in the building often felt excluded from their private world. The twins didn't need outside friends when they had each other. They shared everything: clothes, food, secrets, dreams about the future when they would grow up and take care of their father properly. But by the winter of 1903, Benjamin's situation had become desperate, beyond anything the twins could understand. The small savings he had managed to accumulate were exhausted. The factory jobs that had sustained Chicago's working families were disappearing as industry moved elsewhere. The charitable organizations that provided occasional assistance were overwhelmed by the needs of thousands of families facing similar circumstances. Benjamin began spending long hours away from the apartment, not searching for employment as he told the twins, but meeting with people who offered solutions to his impossible situation. The conversations took place in dim saloons and back rooms of businesses, where men with steady income discussed opportunities that required difficult choices. "There are families out west who want children," explained Thomas Morrison, a well-dressed man who claimed to represent adoption agencies serving prosperous ranching families. "Good families who can provide education, proper homes, opportunities for young girls to grow up with advantages." Benjamin's hands shook as he considered Morrison's proposal. The man was offering substantial payment for placement fees that would solve Benjamin's immediate financial crisis while supposedly ensuring his daughters' futures with families who could provide what he could not. "The children would be placed separately," Morrison continued, noting Benjamin's hesitation. "Western families typically prefer single children. It allows for better integration into established households and prevents the complications that can arise when siblings maintain exclusive bonds." The phrase "exclusive bonds" struck Benjamin like a physical blow. He recognized that his daughter's extraordinary connection might indeed be seen as problematic by potential adoptive families who wanted children to integrate completely into their existing family structures. Morrison painted pictures of ranch houses with gardens, educational opportunities, and stable futures that made Benjamin's cramped tenement apartment seem like a prison he was condemning his daughters to inhabit. The money being offered would allow him to relocate, find better employment, and perhaps eventually establish circumstances where he could reclaim his daughters after providing them with the foundation he currently couldn't offer. "It's temporary," Benjamin told himself during sleepless nights when he listened to Clara and Sarah whispering their private conversations in the bed they shared. "Once I get established somewhere better, I'll bring them back together. I'll give them the life Margaret wanted for them." The twins sensed the change in their father's behavior without understanding its source. Benjamin became increasingly anxious, spending long periods staring out their window with an expression of agonized indecision. He began asking them strange questions about what they remembered of their life together, as if testing whether their memories would survive some coming disruption. "Do you girls know how much Daddy loves you?" he would ask suddenly, pulling them close with desperate urgency. "Of course, Daddy," Clara would reply, confused by the tears in his eyes. "We love you too. Promise me you'll always remember that. Everything Daddy does is to help you have better lives," Benjamin would continue, his voice breaking. "Even if you don't understand it at the time." The twins would nod solemnly, not comprehending why their father seemed to be saying goodbye during ordinary Tuesday evenings when nothing was changing except the increasing coldness of their apartment and the growing hollowness of their father's eyes. On December 15, 1903, Benjamin made the decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He dressed Clara and Sarah carefully in their best clothes, matching blue dresses that Margaret had sewn before her death, and told them they were going on a special adventure to meet new friends. "Will we be back for supper?" Sarah asked, holding Clara's hand as they walked through Chicago's busy streets toward the train station. "You'll have supper with your new friends," Benjamin replied, his voice steady despite the destruction occurring. In his heart, "They're very excited to meet you." The twins trusted their father completely. chattering excitedly about the adventure as they boarded the train that would carry them away from everything they had ever known. Benjamin sat between them during the journey, memorizing every detail of their faces, every inflection of their voices, every gesture that made them uniquely his daughters. At the first stop, Morrison appeared with a woman who introduced herself as Mrs. Catherine Williams from the Colorado Children's Placement Agency. She was kind but efficient, explaining to Clara that she would be traveling to a wonderful ranch family who were eagerly awaiting her arrival. "Where's Sarah going?" Clara asked, sudden panic rising in her chest as she realized they were being separated. "Sarah will be traveling to another lovely family," Mrs. Williams explained gently. "Both of you will have wonderful new homes with people who will take very good care of you." The twins' world collapsed in that moment. Their connection, so fundamental to their existence, was being severed by adults who spoke in calm, reasonable tones about best interests and opportunities, while the children's hearts shattered. "Daddy, no!" Sarah screamed, clinging to Clara. With desperate strength, "We have to stay together. We promised." Benjamin knelt beside his daughters, tears streaming down his face as he tried to explain the unexplainable. "This is temporary," he whispered, knowing even as he spoke that he was lying to them and to himself. "Daddy will find you both when he gets better situated. You have to be brave girls and help each other by being good for your new families." The separation that followed was brutal in its efficiency. Mrs. Williams gently but firmly separated the twins, while another woman, Mrs. Dorothy Hanson, prepared to escort Sarah to a different train heading west. The children's screams echoed through the station as they were pulled apart, their small hands reaching desperately for each other across an ever-widening distance. "Clara! Clara!" Sarah's voice grew fainter as she was carried toward her train. "Sarah, don't forget me!" Clara sobbed, fighting against Mrs. Williams' gentle restraint. Benjamin stood frozen on the platform, watching both trains disappear in opposite directions, carrying away the only family he had left in the world. The money in his pocket felt like blood money, payment for destroying the most precious thing he possessed, his daughter's love and trust. The twins' last memory of their father was his silhouette on the Chicago platform. A broken man, whose grief had led him to make an irreversible choice that would echo through decades of their lives. Clara, bound for Montana, pressed her face against the train window until Chicago disappeared completely, leaving her alone with strangers who spoke kindly but couldn't possibly understand that half of her soul was traveling in the opposite direction on another train, toward an unknown destination where her sister would learn to live without the other half of herself. Foundation of loss was complete. Two 5-year-old girls who had never spent a day apart now faced the impossible task of growing up alone, carrying within them the phantom pain of severed connection and the desperate hope that someday, somehow they would find their way back to each other. Neither could imagine that 20 years later, fate would guide them both to the same Montana ranch where their reunion would heal wounds that had never properly closed and fulfill promises that had never been properly made. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Clara's journey, the Morrison Ranch, Montana Territory, 1904-1912. The Wildfire Ranch stretched across Montana's rolling hills like a patchwork quilt of possibility and isolation. Clara's new home sat at the end of a winding dirt road, surrounded by endless sky and the kind of silence that made a city child's ears ring with unfamiliarity. When the wagon carrying her and Mrs. Williams finally stopped in front of the ranch house's wide front porch, Clara felt as though she had traveled to another planet, rather than simply west from Chicago. Eleanor Morrison emerged from the house, with flour-dusted hands and a warm smile that didn't quite reach her worried eyes. At 42, Eleanor had spent 8 years of marriage hoping for children, before accepting that motherhood would come to her through other means. Her husband, Robert Morrison, followed behind her with the careful movements of a man who understood that children required different handling than cattle or horses. "Welcome home, Clara," Eleanor said gently, kneeling to bring herself to the child's eye level. "We've been preparing for you for weeks. Would you like to see your room?" Clara nodded mutely, clutching a small cloth bag that contained her few possessions. From Chicago. The room Eleanor showed her was larger than the entire apartment she had shared with her father and Sarah, complete with a real bed covered in a quilt decorated with dancing horses. But the abundance of space only emphasized how alone she felt without Sarah's breathing beside her at night. The Morrisons were patient, kind people who recognized that their new daughter was grieving something they couldn't fully understand. They had been told only that Clara was an orphan from Chicago whose father had died, leaving her in need of placement with a stable family. The adoption agency had mentioned nothing about a twin sister, describing Clara as a bright, adaptable child who would thrive in a rural environment. During Clara's first months at Wildfire Ranch, she moved through daily routines like a sleepwalker. Eleanor taught her to gather eggs from the henhouse, to help with basic cooking tasks, and to read from the family Bible during evening devotions. Robert showed her how to approach the gentler horses, how to recognize weather patterns by reading cloud formations, and how to identify edible plants during their walks across the ranch property. But Clara's new parents noticed that she often spoke to empty air, carrying on conversations with an imaginary companion she called my sister. When questioned about this sister, Clara would become agitated, insisting that Sarah was real and that they needed to find her. "She's in trouble," Clara would announce with certainty during supper. "Something bad happened to her knee today." Eleanor and Robert exchanged concerned glances during these episodes, unsure whether Clara was displaying normal childhood imagination or signs of deeper emotional disturbance resulting from her unknown past trauma. Dr. James Patterson, the traveling physician who served the ranch communities, examined Clara during one of his quarterly visits and pronounced her physically healthy but emotionally fragile. "The child has suffered some significant loss," he told the Morrisons privately. "These conversations with an imaginary sister may be her way of processing grief. Time and stability should help her adjust to reality." But Clara's connection to Sarah wasn't imagination, and time did nothing to diminish the phantom pain of their separation. She continued to wake in the middle of the night, calling out for Sarah during dreams where they were still together. She would save half of her special treats, explaining to Eleanor that Sarah might be hungry too. She refused to wear certain colors, claiming that "Sarah doesn't like yellow, so I can't wear it either." Eleanor Morrison possessed the patience of a woman who had waited years for motherhood and the wisdom to recognize that forcing Clara to abandon her connection to Sarah would only deepen the child's trauma. Instead, she began incorporating Sarah into their daily conversations, asking Clara what Sarah might think about various ranch activities or what Sarah would enjoy about Montana's changing seasons. "Tell me about Sarah," Eleanor would say during their evening talks. "What games did you play together in Chicago?" Clara would come alive during these conversations, describing their secret language, their shared dreams, and the way Sarah could always make her laugh when she was sad. Eleanor listened carefully, gradually understanding that Clara wasn't fantasizing about an imaginary friend, but mourning the loss of someone who had been literally half of herself. The breakthrough in Clara's adaptation came during the spring of 1905, when a severe thunderstorm trapped several ranch hands away from the main house overnight. Eleanor was managing the crisis alone since Robert was traveling to purchase new breeding stock, and she needed Clara's help to care for the livestock and maintain essential ranch operations. "Clara, I need you to be very brave," Eleanor explained. "As rain lashed against the windows, the horses are frightened by the thunder, and we need to keep them calm until the storm passes." Something in Eleanor's tone of genuine need awakened Clara's dormant sense of purpose. For the first time since arriving at Wildfire Ranch, She felt useful rather than simply cared for. She spent the night helping Eleanor move between the barn and house, bringing feed to nervous animals, monitoring the pregnant Mare who was close to foaling, and proving that a 7-year-old could be a valuable partner during emergencies. "You did wonderful work tonight," Eleanor told Clara as dawn broke over the storm-cleared landscape. "I couldn't have managed without you. You have your father's strength and your mother's gentleness." The phrase "your mother's gentleness" struck Clara profoundly. Eleanor was referring to Margaret Caldwell, the mother Clara barely remembered. But for the first time, Clara began to understand that having multiple mothers, biological and adoptive, didn't diminish either relationship. Over the following months, Clara began integrating into ranch life while maintaining her connection to Sarah through private rituals and conversations. She learned to ride horses with natural skill, developed expertise in animal husbandry that impressed visiting ranchers, and showed aptitude for the complex logistics of ranch management that would serve her well in adulthood. But even as Clara grew stronger and more confident, she never stopped believing that Sarah was alive somewhere, facing her own challenges and needing the other half of herself that Clara carried within her heart. Sarah's journey. The Hendricks homestead. Wyoming Territory, 1904 to 1912, 300 miles south of Clara's Montana ranch. Sarah's new life unfolded under dramatically different circumstances that would shape her character in ways both parallel and complementary to her twins' development. The Hendricks homestead near Casper, Wyoming, was a more modest operation than Wildfire Ranch, consisting of a small farmhouse, limited livestock, and fields that produced enough grain to sustain the family with little surplus for economic security. Martha Hendricks was a stern woman of 38 who had agreed to take Sarah, primarily for the practical assistance a child could provide rather than from maternal longing. Her husband, Samuel Hendricks, worked as a part-time sheriff's deputy while attempting to make their homestead profitable, leaving Martha to manage most daily operations alone. "You'll earn your keep here," Martha informed Sarah on her first day, showing her to a tiny room under the farmhouse eaves. "Everyone works on a farm, and children are no exception. You'll help with cooking, cleaning, animal care, and field work when you're old enough." Unlike Clara's gentle introduction to ranch life, Sarah's adaptation was a matter of survival. Martha Hendricks believed that children became capable through necessity rather than gradual encouragement, and she immediately assigned Sarah responsibilities that tested the limits of a 5-year-old's physical and emotional capacity. Sarah's days began before dawn with egg collection and chicken feeding, followed by breakfast preparation and cleanup. She learned to churn butter, tend the vegetable garden, and assist with laundry using methods that left her small hands raw and aching. Martha's approach was not intentionally cruel, but it reflected her own harsh upbringing and the unforgiving realities of homestead life where survival required everyone's contribution. The emotional isolation Sarah experienced was perhaps more challenging than the physical demands. Martha showed little affection or patience for childhood needs, treating Sarah more like a hired hand than a daughter. Samuel was kinder, but absent frequently, leaving Sarah to navigate the complex requirements of her new life without the emotional support that might have eased her adaptation. Sarah's grief for Clara manifested differently than her twins' mourning. While Clara talked openly about her missing sister, Sarah internalized her pain, developing a stoic exterior that protected her from Martha's impatience with emotional displays. She would lie awake at night, whispering conversations with Clara into her pillow, sharing the day's challenges and drawing strength from the connection she maintained in her imagination. Clara would know how to fix this. Sarah would think when struggling with tasks beyond her capabilities. She began developing problem-solving approaches by asking herself what Clara would do, effectively maintaining their partnership despite their physical separation. The survival skills Sarah learned during her early years with the Hendricks family were harsh but valuable. She became extraordinarily competent at managing complex household operations, developed physical strength and endurance that exceeded most children her age, and learned to think strategically about resource management and efficiency. But Sarah's most significant development was her growing determination to someday find Clara. Unlike Clara, who hoped for reunion while adapting to her new life, Sarah began planning for reunion as her primary life goal. She saved every penny she earned through extra work, memorized geographic information about Western territories, and developed skills she believed would help her eventually locate her twin sister. "Someday I'm going to find my sister," Sarah announced to Martha during one of their rare conversations about personal matters. "You need to stop living in the past and focus on your current responsibilities," Martha replied curtly. "Dwelling on what's gone will only make you miserable." But Sarah's determination only strengthened in response to discouragement. She began studying maps and Samuel's law enforcement materials, learning about transportation routes between territories, and developing an understanding of how people moved across the Western landscape. Her twin connection had become a navigational star that guided every decision she made about her future. The parallel development, though separated by hundreds of miles and dramatically different circumstances, Clara and Sarah developed remarkably similar capabilities during their childhood years. Both became exceptionally competent at managing livestock, both developed leadership skills that impressed adults, and both maintained the intuitive connection that had defined their early relationship. Clara's gentle upbringing at Wildfire Ranch allowed her to develop confidence and social skills that would later make her an effective leader. She learned to work collaboratively with ranch hands, to solve problems through patience and observation, and to value relationships as the foundation of successful operations. Sarah's harsh training at the Hendricks homestead forged her into a remarkably self-reliant individual with extraordinary practical skills. She learned to work independently under pressure, to accomplish tasks with limited resources, and to persist through difficulties that would defeat less determined people. Twins developed an unusual sensitivity to animals and weather patterns that enhanced their value as ranch workers. Both showed natural aptitude for organizing complex operations and managing multiple responsibilities simultaneously. Both became known in their respective communities as unusually capable young women whose maturity exceeded their years. Most importantly, both maintained their connection to each other through private rituals and internal conversations that sustained them through their most difficult moments. Neither ever stopped believing that reunion was possible, and both began making decisions during their teenage years that would eventually lead them toward each other. By 1912, as Clara and Sarah reached their 14th birthdays, both had become indispensable members of their adoptive communities. Clara was recognized throughout the Montana ranching community as Eleanor, Morrison's capable daughter who could manage Wildfire Ranch operations with remarkable skill. Sarah had transformed the Hendricks homestead into a profitable operation through her innovative approaches to farming and livestock management, but both young women carried within them the unhealed wound of separation and the growing certainty that their adult lives would somehow lead them back to each other. The foundation of loss that had defined their childhood was beginning to transform into a foundation of determination that would guide their journey toward reunion. The adaptation years were ending. The search years were about to begin. Clara's crisis. Wildfire Ranch, Montana, 1918. The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, its yellow paper trembling in Eleanor Morrison's hands as she read the words that would destroy the only stability Clara had known for 14 years. Eleanor sank into the kitchen chair, her face draining of color as the implications of the message settled into her understanding. "What is it?" Clara asked, looking up from the ranch ledger she had been updating. At 19, Clara had become Eleanor's full partner in managing Wildfire Ranch operations. Her mathematical skills and organizational abilities making her indispensable to the ranch's continued success. Eleanor handed her the telegram without speaking, unable to find words for news that would shatter Clara's world once again. The message was brief but devastating. Robert Morrison killed in action, France, March 15. Stop body being shipped home. Stop, deepest condolences. Stop, War Department. Clara read the telegram 3 times before its meaning penetrated her shock. Robert Morrison, the gentle man who had become her father in every way that mattered, was dead. The great war that had seemed so distant from their Montana ranch had reached across an ocean to claim the most important man in her life. No, Clara whispered, the ledger book sliding from her numb fingers. No, this has to be a mistake. Papa said he would be back before spring roundup. He promised. Eleanor pulled Clara into her arms as they both began to comprehend the magnitude of their loss. Robert had enlisted despite being 45 years old, driven by patriotic duty, and Robert had enlisted despite being 45 years old. Ranch's dire financial situation. The military pay had been keeping Wildfire Ranch afloat during years of drought and falling cattle prices, but now that income was gone forever. The weeks following Robert's death revealed the full extent of the ranch's financial crisis. Without Robert's military pay, and with cattle prices continuing to plummet, Wildfire Ranch was facing bankruptcy that would force the sale of everything Clara and Eleanor had worked to build. The bank held mortgages that exceeded the ranch's current value, and creditors were demanding immediate payment for outstanding debts. We have 60 days, Eleanor explained to Clara as they reviewed the ranch's books with James Patterson, the local banker who had become their reluctant financial advisor. Either we find a way to raise $8,000, or the bank will foreclose and auction everything. $8,000 might as well have been $8 million for 2 women operating a failing ranch in 1918 Montana. Eleanor's inheritance from her family had been invested in ranch improvements years earlier, and Clara had no resources beyond her labor and skills. The ranch hands who had remained loyal through difficult times could no longer be paid regularly, and most were seeking employment elsewhere. Clara's response to this crisis revealed the depth of character that 14 years of ranch life had developed within her. Rather than succumbing to despair, she began developing systematic plans for saving Wildfire Ranch through approaches that others hadn't considered. What if we change our operation entirely? Clara proposed during one of their desperate planning sessions. Instead of competing with large cattle operations, we could focus on horse breeding and training. As growing demand for quality horses as automobiles increased the value of trained riding stock for recreation. Eleanor was amazed by Clara's strategic thinking and willingness to completely reimagine their operation rather than simply trying to maintain failing approaches. Clara had inherited Robert's eye for livestock quality and combined it with business instincts that surprised experienced ranchers who consulted on their situation. Horse breeding requires significant initial investment. For quality breeding stock, James Patterson pointed out, where would you find the capital for such a transition? Clara had been researching this challenge for weeks, studying agricultural reports and consulting with horse breeders throughout the region. There's a government program providing loans for agricultural innovation, she explained. If we can demonstrate a viable business plan for horse breeding operations, we could qualify for funding that would allow us to transition while maintaining the ranch. The application process for agricultural development loans was complex and competitive, requiring detailed financial projections, references from established ranchers, and demonstration of management capabilities that many officials questioned when presented by a 19-year-old woman. Clara spent months developing documentation that proved her competence while fighting against assumptions about her age and gender. But Clara's most significant challenge wasn't financial or bureaucratic. The stress of potentially losing Wildfire Ranch had awakened the profound loneliness she had managed to suppress during her years of adaptation. Without Sarah beside her during this crisis, Clara felt incomplete in ways that threatened to overwhelm her determination. "I keep thinking about what Sarah would do," Clara confided to Eleanor during one of their late-night conversations about the ranch's future. "She always had different ideas than me, and together we could solve problems that seemed impossible." Alone, Eleanor had come to understand that Clara's connection to her twin sister was fundamental to her identity, rather than childhood fantasy that would fade with time. "Tell me what you think Sarah would suggest about our current situation," Eleanor encouraged, recognizing that channeling Clara's twin connection might actually provide valuable perspective. Clara closed her eyes and imagined the conversation she would have with Sarah about saving Wildfire Ranch. Sarah would say we're thinking too small, Clara realized suddenly. She would want to know why we're only considering horse breeding when we could create something completely new. This imaginary consultation with Sarah led Clara to develop the innovative solution that would ultimately save Wildfire Ranch. Instead of simply transitioning to horse breeding, Clara proposed creating the first female-operated ranch management training program in Montana, teaching other women the skills necessary to run agricultural operations while their husbands served in the military or worked in distant industries. Sarah's Revolution, Hendricks Homestead, Wyoming, 1918, 300 miles south. Sarah Hendricks was facing her own crisis that would force decisions about her future and her ongoing search for Clara. At 19, Sarah had transformed the struggling Hendricks homestead into one of Wyoming's most profitable small farms through innovations in crop rotation, livestock management, and resource efficiency that impressed agricultural experts throughout the territory. But Sarah's success had created unexpected complications with Martha and Samuel Hendricks, who were beginning to feel like hired hands on their own property rather than parents to the young woman, who had revolutionized their operation. Sarah's competence and independence challenged traditional family dynamics in ways that created growing tension within the household. "You're making decisions about our farm without consulting us," Martha complained during a heated conversation about Sarah's latest agricultural innovations. "This is still our property, not yours to manage however you choose." Sarah felt the familiar frustration of being treated like a child, despite demonstrating capabilities that exceeded many adult farmers in the region. Her years of adaptation to harsh conditions had forged her into someone who thought strategically about long-term success rather than simply surviving day to day. But the Hendricks family seemed uncomfortable with her transformation. The breaking point came when Sarah discovered that Martha and Samuel were planning to arrange her marriage to William Henderson, the son of neighboring homesteaders who had been struggling to make their own farm profitable. The marriage would combine the two properties while supposedly providing Sarah with security and the Hendricks family with expanded operations. "I won't marry someone I don't love for the convenience of combining farms," Sarah announced firmly when confronted with their plans. "And I won't abandon my search for my sister to accommodate your business arrangements." Martha's response revealed the depth of misunderstanding that had grown between them over the years. "Your obsession with finding this imaginary sister has to end," Martha declared angrily. "You're a grown woman with responsibilities to this family and this community. It's time to stop living in childhood fantasies." The word imaginary struck Sarah like a physical blow. Clara wasn't imaginary, and their connection wasn't a fantasy that could be dismissed for the convenience of others. Sarah realized that staying with the Hendricks family would mean abandoning the most important goal of her life and accepting the future that honored their wishes rather than her own truth. "Clara isn't imaginary," Sarah replied with quiet intensity. "She's my twin sister, and I will find her. If you can't accept that reality, then perhaps it's time for me to find my own path." The confrontation that followed was painful but necessary. Sarah had to choose between the security of remaining with the only family she had known for 14 years and the uncertainty of leaving to pursue her search for Clara. The choice revealed how completely her dedication to reunion had shaped her character and priorities. Samuel Hendricks attempted to mediate between his wife and their adopted daughter, recognizing that Sarah's agricultural innovations had made their homestead far more valuable than when she had arrived as a 5-year-old. "Sarah, you're part of this family," he pleaded. "We can work out some compromise about your future that honors your wishes while maintaining our relationship." But Sarah understood that compromise would ultimately mean abandoning her search for Clara, and that was a sacrifice she couldn't make. "I'm grateful for everything you've provided," Sarah told them with genuine emotion. "But I need to follow my own path now, even if it means leaving everything familiar behind." Sarah's decision to leave the Hendricks homestead required careful planning since she had no resources beyond her labor and skills. She spent weeks developing strategies for supporting herself while conducting her search for Clara, studying maps and transportation routes that might lead her toward her twin sister. The breakthrough came when Sarah learned about the Women's Land Army, a federal program recruiting women to work on farms and ranches throughout the West, while men served in the military overseas. The program offered travel opportunities, agricultural work that matched her skills, and the possibility of working in different territories where she might find traces of Clara's whereabouts. "I'm joining the Women's Land Army," Sarah announced to the Hendricks family during their final conversation about her future. "It will allow me to support myself while traveling throughout the Western territories. Somewhere out there, Clara is doing the same kind of work I'm trained for. Eventually, our paths will cross." Martha's final response revealed both her frustration and her grudging respect for Sarah's determination. "You're making a mistake, leaving security for an impossible dream," she said. "But I suppose you've always been too stubborn to accept reasonable limitations." Sarah packed her few belongings in a single carpet bag, keeping only items that had practical value for her uncertain future. The most precious possession she carried was a small piece of blue fabric torn from the dress she had worn during her separation from Clara, a tangible connection to their shared past that reminded her why the search was worth any sacrifice. The parallel desperation as 1918 drew to a close. Both Clara and Sarah found themselves facing the complete destruction of their established lives. Clara was fighting to save Wildfire Ranch while managing grief for Robert Morrison's death and overwhelming responsibility for Eleanor's future security. Sarah was preparing to leave the only family she had known since childhood to pursue a search that others considered hopeless. But both young women approached their crises with determination shaped by their twin connection and their shared belief that reunion was not only possible, but inevitable. Clara drew strength from imaginary conversations with Sarah, while developing innovative solutions for saving the ranch. Sarah found courage for her uncertain journey by maintaining faith that Clara was somewhere facing similar challenges and needing the other half of herself. Neither could know that their separate struggles were preparing them for a convergence that would test everything they had learned during their years of separation. The foundation of loss that had defined their childhood was about to transform into the foundation of hope that would guide them toward each other. The breaking point had arrived, but instead of destroying them, it was preparing them for the most important chapter of their parallel journeys. Soon, their paths would begin the final convergence that would lead both sisters to the same Montana ranch, where their reunion would heal wounds that had never properly closed and fulfill promises that had never been properly kept. Clara's innovation. The Montana Women's Ranch Academy, 1919. The approval letter from the Montana Agricultural Development Board arrived on a crisp April morning, carrying news that would transform Clara's desperate gamble into a revolutionary success. Her proposal for the first women's ranch management training program in the territory had been accepted, complete with federal funding that would not only save Wildfire Ranch, but establish it as a pioneering educational institution. "Miss Morrison," the letter began, using the surname Clara had legally adopted after Robert's death, "your innovative approach to addressing agricultural labor shortages through comprehensive training for women, demonstrates exactly the kind of forward-thinking leadership our territory needs. The board is pleased to approve your funding request for the Montana Women's Ranch Academy. Clara read the letter 3 times before the magnitude of her achievement truly settled in her mind. At 20 years old, she would become the youngest person in Montana history to operate a federally funded educational program. More importantly, she had saved Eleanor's ranch while creating something that could benefit hundreds of women throughout the West. Eleanor Morrison watched Clara's face transform from anxious anticipation to overwhelming relief to determined focus as she processed the implications of their success. "Clara, this is extraordinary," Eleanor said, embracing her adopted daughter with pride and amazement. "You've not only saved our home, but created opportunities for women throughout the territory." The Montana Women's Ranch Academy would train women in every aspect of agricultural operations, from livestock management and crop production to business planning and equipment maintenance. Clara's curriculum was designed to produce graduates who could manage ranches independently, supporting families while their husbands served in the military or worked in distant industries. But Clara's deepest motivation for the academy extended beyond educational innovation or financial necessity. She hoped that creating a program that drew women from throughout the Western territories might somehow bring her into contact with Sarah or someone who knew of her whereabouts. "We'll be recruiting students from Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, and even California," Clara explained to Eleanor as they planned the academy's first semester. "Women from all over the West will come here to learn ranch management. If Sarah is anywhere in this region, word about our program might reach her." Clara's systematic approach to the academy's development reflected the problem-solving skills she had developed through years of imaginary consultations with Sarah. She created recruitment materials that would circulate throughout territories where Sarah might be living, hoping that her twins' agricultural skills would make her interested in advanced training opportunities. The first group of academy students arrived at Wildfire Ranch in June 1919, representing 8 different territories and backgrounds ranging from farmers' daughters to city women seeking new opportunities in agricultural careers. Clara's teaching methods emphasized practical problem-solving and adaptive thinking, skills she had learned through necessity during her own development. Among the initial students was Catherine Wells, a widow from Colorado whose husband had been killed in the war, leaving her to manage a struggling homestead alone. Catherine's determination and innovative thinking reminded Clara powerfully of her own resilience, and the 2 women developed a close friendship that helped fill some of the loneliness Clara had carried since Robert's death. "You have an unusual gift for teaching," Catherine observed during one of their evening conversations. "You explain complex operations in ways that make them seem manageable rather than overwhelming. Where did you learn such patience?" Clara's answer revealed how completely her connection to Sarah influenced her approach to life. "I learned to think about how my twin sister would want things explained to her," Clara admitted. "She was always more direct than me, so I had to find clear, simple ways to share ideas." Catherine's response surprised Clara with its insight. "You talk about your sister as if she's still part of your daily life," Catherine noted gently. "Do you maintain correspondence with her?" The question forced Clara to confront the reality that she had never explained her situation fully to anyone except Eleanor. "My sister and I were separated when we were 5 years old," Clara said quietly. "I don't know where she is, but I still feel connected to her. Sometimes I imagine conversations with her when I need to solve difficult problems." Catherine's understanding response created the first opportunity Clara had experienced to discuss her twin connection with someone who didn't view it as childhood fantasy or emotional disturbance. "That connection sounds like a strength rather than something to overcome," Catherine said thoughtfully. "Perhaps your teaching gift comes from maintaining that link to someone who thinks differently than you do." The Academy's success exceeded all expectations during its first year of operation. Graduates were recruited by ranches throughout the territory, and the program's reputation attracted students from increasingly distant locations. Clara's innovative curriculum was being studied by agricultural educators throughout the country, establishing her as a recognized expert in practical ranch education. But the Academy's most significant achievement was the network of communication it created among women working in agricultural operations throughout the West. Students and graduates maintained correspondence with Clara and each other, sharing information about job opportunities, technical innovations, and personal news that created an informal intelligence network spanning multiple territories. Sarah's journey, the Women's Land Army Circuit. 1919, Sarah's first assignment with the Women's Land Army took her to a cattle ranch outside Denver, Colorado, where she joined a crew of 12 women managing operations for an absent owner who was serving overseas. The work was demanding but familiar, and Sarah's experience at the Hendricks homestead made her immediately valuable to the ranch's emergency management team. "You know more about livestock handling than most men I've worked with," observed Margaret Foster, the Land Army supervisor who coordinated assignments throughout the region. "Your background must have provided excellent training." Sarah had learned to deflect questions about her background, while gathering information about other women in the program who might have knowledge of her sister. "I grew up on a homestead in Wyoming," she explained truthfully. "But I'm always interested in learning about different approaches to ranch management." "Have you worked with women from Montana operations?" Margaret's response provided the first encouraging lead Sarah had discovered since beginning her search. "There's a new training program in Montana that several of our veterans have mentioned," Margaret said. "Some kind of ranch academy that's specifically training women for agricultural management. You might find their methods interesting." Sarah felt her heart racing as Margaret described the Montana Women's Ranch Academy in terms that seemed perfectly designed to attract someone with her background and interests. A training program for women in ranch management located in Montana, operating under innovative principles that emphasized practical problem solving. It sounded exactly like something Clara might be involved with if she had developed agricultural skills similar to Sarah's own. "Do you know the name of this academy or who operates it?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice casual despite her growing excitement. "I believe it's called the Montana Women's Ranch Academy, operated by someone named Morrison," Margaret replied. "I could get you more information if you're interested in applying for their advanced training program." The name Morrison meant nothing to Sarah, but the possibility that Clara might be connected to the academy made her desperate to learn more. She spent the following weeks gathering every piece of information she could find about the Montana program while maintaining her performance standards with the Land Army assignments. Sarah's investigation revealed that the academy was located near a town called Pine Ridge, Montana, and that it was operated by a young woman who had developed innovative approaches to ranch education through her own practical experience. The descriptions of the program's philosophy and methods resonated with Sarah's understanding of how Clara's mind worked: systematic, inclusive, and focused on adaptive problem solving. "I want to apply for the Montana Academy's advanced training program," Sarah told Margaret Foster during their next assignment review. "The curriculum sounds like exactly what I need to develop my management skills." Margaret was surprised by Sarah's request, since her current performance indicated she already possessed advanced capabilities. "Sarah, you're one of our most skilled participants," Margaret pointed out. "Why do you feel you need additional training?" Sarah's answer was carefully truthful without revealing her real motivation. "I want to learn different approaches to ranch management that might help me eventually establish my own operation," she explained. "The Montana Academy sounds like it offers perspectives I haven't encountered before." The application process for the Montana Women's Ranch Academy required detailed documentation of Sarah's agricultural experience and references from her Land Army supervisors. Sarah spent considerable effort crafting her application materials to demonstrate her qualifications, while subtly indicating her particular interest in innovative approaches to ranch operations. Her application essay included carefully chosen phrases that she hoped might resonate with Clara. If she was indeed connected to the academy, I believe successful ranch management requires systematic thinking and adaptive problem solving that builds on partnerships between people who complement each other's strengths. Sarah submitted her application to the Montana Women's Ranch Academy in September 1919, along with a prayer that she was finally taking steps toward reunion with Clara. The weeks of waiting for a response were agonizing, filled with hopes and fears about whether she was pursuing a genuine lead or another disappointing dead end. The network expands throughout the autumn of 1919. Both Clara and Sarah were unknowingly participating in the creation of communication networks that would eventually bring them together. Clara's academy was attracting students from throughout the Western Territories, while Sarah's work with the Women's Land Army was creating connections with agricultural operations across multiple states. The Montana Women's Ranch Academy's reputation continued to grow as graduates demonstrated exceptional competence in their subsequent positions. Ranch owners throughout the region began specifically requesting academy-trained managers, and Clara found herself fielding inquiries from operations as far away as California and Oregon. One particularly significant inquiry came from the Diamond Creek Ranch in Wyoming, whose owner had heard about the Academy's innovative training methods from several sources. "Miss Morrison," the letter read, "we would be interested in hiring one of your graduates to help modernize our operations. We've been particularly impressed by reports of graduates who combine traditional skills with innovative approaches to problem solving." Clara was pleased by the Wyoming inquiry because it represented another opportunity to extend her network into territories where Sarah might be living. She made careful note of the ranch's location near Casper, Wyoming, and planned to recommend graduates who would maintain correspondence about their experiences and the agricultural community they encountered. Sarah's Land Army assignments had taken her to ranches throughout Colorado, Utah, and parts of Montana, creating her own network of contacts and information sources. Her systematic approach to gathering information about missing persons had made her known among Land Army participants as someone who helped people locate lost family members. Sarah has an amazing talent for finding connections between people, Margaret Foster mentioned to other supervisors. She's helped 3 different women locate relatives they'd lost contact with during the war. It's like she has an instinct for recognizing family resemblances and making connections others miss. Sarah's reputation for helping others find lost family members was based on her passionate commitment to reunion and her systematic approach to gathering and analyzing information. She maintained detailed records of everyone she met, noting physical descriptions, background information, and potential connections that might prove relevant to various searches. But her most important breakthrough came when she received notification that her application to the Montana Women's Ranch Academy had been accepted for the spring 1920 semester. The acceptance letter was signed by Clara Morrison, director, and included course descriptions that demonstrated exactly the kind of innovative thinking Sarah associated with her twin sister's approach to problem solving. "This could be it," Sarah whispered to herself as she read the acceptance letter for the 5th time. "After 15 years of searching, this could finally be the path that leads me back to Clara." Sarah's preparation for attending the Montana Academy involved careful planning for what might be either another disappointment or the reunion she had dreamed of since childhood. She arranged her Land Army assignments to conclude in February 1920, allowing her to travel to Montana for the spring semester that would begin in March. As winter settled over the Western Territories, both Clara and Sarah were making final preparations for a convergence that neither could quite believe might actually occur. Clara was developing curriculum for the spring semester while hoping that the Academy's expanding Reputation might somehow bring Sarah to her attention. Sarah was concluding her land army service while preparing for a journey to Montana that represented her best hope for finding her twin sister. The paths that had diverged in a Chicago train station 17 years earlier were finally beginning to converge toward a reunion that would test everything both women had learned about resilience, hope, and the unbreakable bonds that connect souls across any distance or time. March 1920, the arrival. Train's whistle echoed across the Montana landscape as it approached Pine Ridge Station, carrying Sarah toward what she desperately hoped would be her reunion with Clara. Sarah pressed her face against the window, studying the rolling hills and distant mountains that would either become the backdrop for the most important moment of her life or another crushing disappointment. In her 17-year search, her carpet bag contained everything she owned: practical clothing suited for ranch work, the carefully preserved piece of blue fabric from their childhood separation, detailed notes about every lead she had followed in her search for Clara, and letters of recommendation that had secured her place at the Montana Women's Ranch Academy. More importantly, it contained a heart full of hope that had sustained her through years of separation and uncertainty. As the train slowed to a stop, Sarah scanned the platform for anyone who might be meeting academy students. Her breath caught when she spotted a young woman with auburn hair organizing a group of arriving passengers, her movements efficient and confident in ways that reminded Sarah powerfully of her own approach to managing complex situations. The woman directing the arrivals was Clara, though neither sister recognized the other yet. 17 years of separate development had changed their physical appearances significantly, and both had learned to project professional competence that masked their inner vulnerabilities. Clara wore practical clothing suited for ranch work, her hair arranged in a neat style that emphasized her role as academy director. Sarah's appearance reflected her land army experience, practical and weathered in ways that spoke of genuine agricultural expertise. "Welcome to Pine Ridge," Clara called out to the group of arriving students. "I'm Clara Morrison, director of the Montana Women's Ranch Academy. Please gather your belongings and we'll transport you to Wildfire Ranch where your training will take place." Sarah studied Clara intently, feeling an inexplicable sense of familiarity that she couldn't quite identify. Something about Clara's voice, her gestures, her way of organizing people seemed hauntingly familiar, but Sarah had learned to be cautious about seeing connections where none existed. Too many false hopes had taught her to verify her instincts carefully before allowing herself to believe in possibilities that might prove illusory. "Miss Morrison," Sarah said, approaching Clara with her characteristic directness, "I'm Sarah Hendricks. I wrote to you about my background with the Women's Land Army and my particular interest in innovative ranch management techniques." Clara looked up from her clipboard, meeting Sarah's eyes for the first time in 17 years. Something electric passed between them, a moment of recognition that neither could quite explain or trust. Clara felt her heart racing for reasons she couldn't understand, while Sarah experienced a flood of emotions that seemed disproportionate to meeting a stranger, however important their academy might be to her future. "Miss Hendricks," Clara replied, consulting her notes with hands that trembled slightly. "Yes, your application was quite impressive. Your experience with adaptive agricultural techniques should be valuable for our advanced curriculum." Neither woman mentioned the profound sense of connection they both felt during this first exchange. Both had learned to be cautious about emotional responses that might reflect their desperate longing for reunion rather than actual recognition. The moment passed without acknowledgement, though both would remember it vividly when the truth was finally revealed. The Academy Environment Wildfire Ranch had been transformed into an impressive educational facility that combined practical training areas with comfortable living quarters for students from throughout the Western Territories. Clara had designed the layout to encourage both individual excellence and collaborative problem-solving, creating an environment where women could develop confidence while learning from each other's diverse experiences. Sarah's assigned room was in the main dormitory building, positioned where she could observe the ranch's daily operations while enjoying spectacular views of the Montana landscape. As she unpacked her few belongings, Sarah felt a sense of belonging that she hadn't experienced since childhood. Something about Wildfire Ranch felt like home in ways she couldn't explain. The Academy's first-day orientation revealed the scope of Clara's educational innovation. The curriculum combined traditional ranch management skills with cutting-edge approaches to business planning, equipment maintenance, and resource optimization. Clara's teaching methods emphasized systematic problem-solving and adaptive thinking that reflected her own development through years of imaginary consultations with Sarah. Our goal, Clara explained to the assembled students, is to prepare you for success in any agricultural environment you might encounter. This requires not just technical skills, but the ability to think creatively about challenges and develop solutions that others might not consider. Sarah listened to Clara's orientation with growing admiration for the program's sophistication and depth. Clara's approach to education reflected exactly the kind of systematic thinking Sarah had developed through her own agricultural experience. And the Academy's emphasis on adaptive problem-solving resonated perfectly with Sarah's philosophy about ranch management. During the afternoon practical sessions, Sarah demonstrated the advanced skills she had developed through her land army service and homestead experience. Her competence with livestock handling, equipment maintenance, and resource management quickly established her as one of the Academy's most capable students, earning Clara's professional respect and attention. "Your technique with the horses is remarkable," Clara observed as Sarah worked with a particularly difficult stallion. "You seem to anticipate their responses in ways that suggest considerable experience with animal psychology. I learned early that understanding animal behavior requires patience and systematic observation," Sarah replied, unconsciously echoing approaches that Clara had developed independently. "Once you understand how they think, you can work with their natural instincts rather than fighting against them." Clara was struck by the similarity between Sarah's philosophy and her own approach to both animal management and human education. Their conversations during practical sessions revealed increasingly parallel thinking that seemed remarkable even considering their shared agricultural backgrounds. The growing connection over the following weeks, Clara and Sarah developed a professional relationship that gradually deepened into genuine friendship. Both women recognized qualities in the other that they had rarely encountered, a combination of practical competence, innovative thinking, and intuitive understanding that made collaboration both effortless and energizing. Sarah proved to be Clara's most insightful student, offering suggestions and alternative approaches that enhanced the Academy's curriculum while demonstrating mastery of concepts that typically required months to develop. Clara found herself looking forward to Sarah's questions and observations, which consistently pushed her to think more deeply about her own teaching methods. "You have an unusual gift for seeing solutions that others miss," Clara told Sarah during one of their evening discussions about ranch management techniques. "Your perspective consistently adds dimensions I hadn't considered." Sarah felt the same sense of intellectual partnership that had once characterized her relationship with Clara, though she still couldn't identify why this particular friendship felt so natural and energizing. "I think we complement each other's thinking patterns," Sarah replied. "You approach problems systematically while I tend to look for unconventional alternatives. Together we seem to find better solutions than either of us would develop alone." Neither woman recognized that they were unconsciously recreating the collaborative problem-solving partnership that had defined their early childhood. Their separate development had enhanced their natural complementarity, making their adult friendship even more effective than their childhood connection had been. The other Academy students began commenting on the remarkable partnership between Clara and Sarah. noting that their collaborative work consistently produced innovations that advanced the entire program. Catherine Wells, Clara's friend from the previous year, observed the relationship with particular interest. "I've never seen Clara work so effortlessly with anyone," Catherine mentioned to another student. "It's as if she and Sarah share some kind of intuitive understanding that makes communication unnecessary. They seem to know what the other is thinking without having to explain their ideas." Similar observations were being made by Sarah's fellow students, who noted that her usual reserve and emotional guardedness seemed to disappear when she was working with Clara. Sarah's roommate, Jennifer Davis from Colorado, commented on the Kohru transformation. "Sarah becomes a completely different person when she's collaborating with Miss Morrison," Jennifer observed. "Usually she's so self-contained and careful about trusting people, but with Clara, she seems completely relaxed and open. It's like watching someone come alive." The missed clues, despite their growing closeness and the unmistakable sense of connection both women felt, several factors prevented Clara and Sarah from recognizing each other as the twin sisters they had sought for 17 years. Their physical appearances had changed significantly since childhood. Their surnames were different due to adoption and legal name changes, and both had learned to be cautious about seeing connections where none existed. More significantly, neither woman expected to find their twin sister in their current circumstances. Clara had imagined that Sarah might be struggling somewhere in need of rescue, while Sarah had envisioned Clara as someone who might have maintained more obvious connections to their shared past. Neither anticipated that their twin would have become a successful professional operating under a different identity. Their conversations often touched on family history and background experiences, but both women had learned to deflect detailed questions about their early lives. Clara spoke generally about being adopted by the Morrison family and losing her father in the war, while Sarah mentioned growing up on a homestead in Wyoming without elaborating on her arrival there as a 5-year-old. "Do you have family in Montana?" Sarah asked during one of their conversations about regional agricultural differences. "My adoptive mother, Eleanor Morrison, lives here at the ranch," Clara replied. "She's been my family since I was 5 years old. What about you? Do you maintain contact with family in Wyoming?" "The Hendricks family took me in when I was young," Sarah answered carefully. "But I've been independent for several years now. I've always felt like my real family might be somewhere else, though I've never been able to locate them." Neither woman pursued these family discussions deeply, enough to reveal the specific details that would have immediately identified them as sisters. Both had developed protective instincts about sharing personal history that might expose emotional vulnerabilities, especially when professional relationships were involved. The closest they came to recognition occurred during a late-night conversation about childhood memories and dreams for the future. Both women were feeling unusually reflective and open after a particularly successful day of collaborative problem-solving. "Do you ever feel like you're missing something essential?" Clara asked, as they sat on the ranch house porch watching stars emerge over the Montana landscape. "Like there's someone who should be sharing your life but isn't there?" Sarah's heart raced at the question, which seemed to address her deepest longing so directly. "Every day," she replied quietly. "I've felt incomplete my entire life, as if part of me is living somewhere else. Do you feel that way too?" "Since I was 5 years old," Clara admitted. "I keep thinking that when I find the missing piece, everything else will finally make sense." Both women sat in comfortable silence, each wondering if the other might somehow be connected to their sense of incompleteness, but neither quite able to bridge the gap between feeling and recognition. The moment passed without revelation, though. Both would remember it as the closest they had come to acknowledging their true connection. The setup for crisis, as spring progressed into early summer, Clara and Sarah's partnership continued to strengthen while their personal bond deepened in ways that both found emotionally satisfying but couldn't quite explain. The academy was experiencing unprecedented success, with graduates being recruited by ranches throughout the region and additional students applying for future semesters. But this success was about to be threatened by circumstances that would create the crisis necessary to reveal their true identities. Unknown to either woman, forces were gathering that would challenge everything they had built together and force them to rely on the kind of intuitive partnership that only siblings could provide. Eleanor Morrison had been monitoring the academy's finances with growing concern about sustainability beyond the initial federal funding period. The program's success had created expansion opportunities that required additional investment, but it had also attracted the attention of competitors who questioned whether women could effectively manage such enterprises independently. Eleanor said during one of their weekly financial reviews, "We need to discuss some challenges that are developing regarding the Academy's future funding and political support." Clara looked up from the student progress reports she was reviewing with Sarah, noting the concern in Eleanor's voice. "What kind of challenges?" Clara asked, though she had sensed growing political resistance to programs that empowered women in traditionally male-dominated industries. Several influential ranchers have been lobbying against continued funding for women's agricultural education, Eleanor explained. They're arguing that such programs threaten traditional family structures and economic stability. Sarah listened to this conversation with growing alarm, recognizing that the Academy's closure would not only destroy Clara's life work, but also eliminate the one place where she felt she truly belonged. More importantly, losing the Academy would mean losing her partnership with Clara, just when she was beginning to believe she had found the connection she had sought her entire life. The stage was set for a crisis that would test both women's resilience and force them to rely on the kind of deep partnership that would finally reveal their true relationship. The moment of recognition was approaching, though neither Clara nor Sarah yet realized how completely their lives were about to change. The storm, gathering the crisis that would ultimately reveal Clara and Sarah's true relationship, began with a letter that arrived at Wildfire Ranch on a humid July morning in 1920. The official Montana State Agricultural Board letterhead carried news that would threaten not only the Academy's existence, but everything Clara had built since Robert Morrison's death. Clara read the letter twice before its implications fully registered, her hands trembling as she absorbed words that could destroy her life's work. The state legislature, under pressure from conservative ranching interests and traditional agricultural lobbies, was reviewing all federal funding for experimental educational programs, with particular scrutiny being applied to initiatives that disrupted established social structures. "What does it say?" Sarah asked, noting Clara's pale complexion and obvious distress as she entered the ranch office where Clara stood frozen beside her desk. Clara handed Sarah the letter without speaking, unable to find words for news that felt like a death sentence for everything they had accomplished together. Sarah read the formal language that essentially accused the Montana Women's Ranch Academy of promoting radical social experimentation that threatened traditional family values and economic stability. "They're demanding a comprehensive review of our curriculum, teaching methods, and student outcomes," Clara finally managed to say. "If the review committee determines that our program promotes inappropriate independence among women, our funding will be terminated immediately." Sarah felt a surge of protective anger that surprised her with its intensity. The Academy represented more than educational innovation or career advancement. It had become the first place in her adult life where she felt she truly belonged. And Clara had become the first person since childhood who seemed to understand her completely. "This is absurd," Sarah said firmly. "Our graduates are managing ranches more efficiently than most men in the territory. How can improved agricultural productivity be considered a threat to economic stability?" Clara appreciated Sarah's immediate support, but she understood the political forces they were facing better than Sarah's optimism could overcome. The review committee includes several ranchers who've been vocal opponents of women's education programs. Clara explained. They're not interested in our actual results. They want to eliminate competition for traditional male-dominated operations. The letter specified that the review would take place in exactly 30 days, requiring the Academy to present detailed documentation of their methods, student achievements, and long-term impact on territorial agricultural development. More ominously, it demanded personal background, investigations of all Academy staff to ensure their moral character and commitment to traditional American values. The investigation threat, the prospect of background investigations, created a crisis that went beyond professional concerns for both Clara and Sarah. Both women carried secrets about their past that could potentially be used against them by hostile reviewers, and both feared that detailed scrutiny might expose vulnerabilities they had carefully protected. Clara's adoption by the Morrison family had been legally documented, but her original identity as Clara Caldwell and the circumstances of her placement might raise questions about her suitability for operating an educational institution. More troubling was the possibility that investigators might discover her ongoing belief in her connection to a missing twin sister, which could be characterized as evidence of emotional instability. Sarah's situation was even more precarious. Her legal name was still Sarah Hendricks, reflecting her adoption by the Wyoming family, but she had never officially documented her original identity or the circumstances of her separation from her biological family. Any investigation into her background would reveal gaps and inconsistencies that might be interpreted as evidence of deception or questionable origins. "We need to prepare for every possible line of attack," Clara told Sarah as they began organizing their defense materials. "These investigators won't be interested in fair assessment. They'll be looking for any excuse to shut us down." Sarah's response revealed the depth of her commitment to protecting what they had built together. "Then we'll give them documentation so comprehensive and compelling that even hostile reviewers won't be able to find legitimate grounds for criticism," she declared. "Our students' success speaks for itself." Over the following days, Clara and Sarah worked together with intensity that revealed the natural partnership they had always shared. They compiled detailed records of every graduate's subsequent achievements, testimonials from ranch owners who had hired academy-trained managers, and financial documentation proving the program's positive economic impact on territorial agricultural development. But their most crucial task was preparing personal statements that would withstand hostile scrutiny without revealing the vulnerabilities that both women carried regarding their search for family and their sense of incomplete identity. This required careful collaboration on narratives that were truthful but strategically selective about personal details. The unexpected discovery, the breakthrough that would change everything, occurred when Sarah was helping Clara organize historical documents for their defense presentation. While searching through files in Eleanor Morrison's office, Sarah discovered a box of personal papers that Eleanor had preserved from Robert Morrison's military service and earlier life. Among these documents was a folder labeled Family Correspondence, 1903 to 1905, that contained letters Robert had exchanged with various agencies and individuals during Clara's adoption process. Sarah wasn't intentionally searching for personal information about Clara's background, but the dates caught her attention because they coincided with the period when she had been separated from her own family. Clara should probably review these documents herself, Sarah thought, but her curiosity about the adoption process that had brought Clara to Wildfire Ranch made her glance through the papers to understand their relevance to their current situation. The first letter she read contained phrases that made her heart stop. ... Placement of Clara Caldwell. Age 5, twin sister separated for individual family placement. Sarah read the sentence 3 times before its implications penetrated her shock. The letter was dated December 1903 and referenced the placement of a 5-year-old girl named Clara Caldwell, whose twin sister had been placed separately. Sarah's hands shook as she continued reading, finding additional references to Clara's original surname, her birth in Chicago, and the circumstances of her father's decision to place both daughters separately with Western families. Every detail matched Sarah's own experience perfectly. The timing, the location, the separation strategy, even specific phrases that echoed her own placement documents. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, sinking into Eleanor's desk chair as the magnitude of her discovery overwhelmed her ability to process it rationally. Clara is my sister." The next document in the file contained even more definitive proof. It was a copy of Benjamin Caldwell's original placement agreement, listing both daughters by name, Clara Elizabeth Caldwell and Sarah Elizabeth Caldwell, twin sisters born June 15, 1898, Chicago, Illinois. Sarah stared at the document that confirmed what her heart had been trying to tell her since the moment she met Clara at the train station. Every instinct that had drawn her to the academy, every moment of inexplicable connection she had felt. With Clara, every sense of belonging she had experienced at Wildfire Ranch, all of it finally made perfect sense. The confrontation and recognition. Sarah sat in Eleanor's office for nearly an hour, holding the documents that proved her 17-year search had finally ended, trying to comprehend that she had found Clara not through systematic investigation, but through the natural gravitational pull that had always connected them. When she finally felt capable of walking without trembling, she went to find Clara in the main academy building. Clara was in the classroom, reviewing lesson plans for the following day's sessions when Sarah appeared in the doorway holding a folder of papers. Something in Sarah's expression, a mixture of overwhelming emotion and stunned realization, made Clara immediately stop what she was doing. "Clara," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need to show you something I found in your mother's files." Clara looked at the papers Sarah was holding, noting how carefully Sarah was controlling her movements, as if the documents contained information too significant to handle carelessly. "What did you find?" Clara asked, rising from her desk with growing concern about Sarah's obvious emotional state. Sarah approached slowly, extending the folder toward Clara with hands that shook despite her efforts to remain calm. "I found the correspondence about your adoption," Sarah said. "Clara, your original name was Clara Elizabeth Caldwell, wasn't it?" Clara's world tilted on its axis as Sarah spoke her birth name, a name she hadn't heard spoken aloud since childhood. "How do you know that?" Clara whispered, though some part of her mind was already beginning to understand the impossible truth Sarah was revealing. "Because my original name was Sarah Elizabeth Caldwell," Sarah replied, tears streaming down her face as she finally spoke the words she had dreamed of saying for 17 years. "Clara, I'm your twin sister. I'm Sarah." Clara stared at Sarah's face, seeing for the first time the familiar features that had been hidden by years of separation and change. The shape of Sarah's eyes, the way she tilted her head when concentrating, the gestures that had seemed so natural during their collaboration. Suddenly everything clicked into place with crystalline clarity. "Sarah?" Clara breathed, reaching out tentatively to touch her sister's face as if she might be dreaming. "Sarah, is it really you?" "It's really me," Sarah sobbed, falling into Clara's arms as 17 years of separation collapsed into a single moment of recognition and reunion. "I've been looking for you everywhere. I never stopped believing I would find you." The sisters held each other with desperate intensity, both crying and laughing simultaneously as the phantom pain of separation that had haunted their entire adult lives finally began to heal. Clara buried her face in Sarah's shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent that she had missed without even understanding what was missing. "I talk to you every day," Clara whispered between sobs. "When I needed to solve problems, I would imagine conversations with you. I never understood why it felt so real." "Because it was real," Sarah replied, stroking Clara's hair with the same gentle touch she had used during their childhood. I felt you with me too. Every decision I made, I wondered what you would think. Every place I went, I hoped I might find you there. The flood of recognition as their initial shock subsided into overwhelming joy. Clara and Sarah began sharing the details of their separate journeys, finally understanding how their parallel development had prepared them for reunion. Clara's systematic approach to education and Sarah's innovative, problem-solving techniques weren't coincidental similarities. They were complementary strengths that had developed naturally from their shared foundation. The Academy, Sarah realized suddenly. You created the Academy hoping it might somehow bring me to you, didn't you? Clara nodded, amazed by how clearly Sarah understood motivations she had barely acknowledged to herself. I knew that if you had developed agricultural skills like mine, you might be interested in advanced training opportunities. I hoped that casting a wide enough net might eventually catch your attention. And the Women's Land Army, Clara said, understanding Sarah's journey with equal clarity. You joined it to travel throughout the territories looking for me. Every assignment I requested was based on areas where I thought you might be living, Sarah confirmed. When I heard about your academy, something told me I had to apply, even though I couldn't explain why it felt so important. The sisters spent the evening sharing 17 years of experiences, discoveries, and adaptations, marveling at how their separate paths had developed their natural partnership into something even stronger than their childhood connection. Clara's educational innovations and Sarah's practical expertise were perfectly complementary, creating possibilities neither could have achieved alone. We're better together than we ever were apart, Clara observed as they sat on the ranch house porch, hands linked as they had been during childhood, watching stars emerge over the Montana landscape. We always were, Sarah replied. We just had to grow into ourselves separately before we could come back together as equals. Eleanor Morrison found them there hours later, still talking and laughing as they caught up on years of separation. When Clara introduced Sarah as her twin sister, Eleanor's amazement was mixed with understanding that finally explained Clara's lifelong sense of incompleteness and her intuitive teaching methods. This explains so much about you, Eleanor told Clara with tears in her eyes. You've been teaching the way you wished someone had taught Sarah, haven't you? The reunion that had seemed impossible for 17 years was finally complete, but Clara and Sarah understood that their rediscovered partnership would face immediate testing. The Academy investigation was still scheduled to proceed, and they would need every bit of their combined strength to protect what they had built together. But now they faced the challenge as true partners, with the connection they had sought. Their entire lives finally restored, and their individual strengths unified into something more powerful than either had imagined possible. The morning after recognition dawn broke over Wildfire Ranch with a clarity that seemed to reflect the transformation in Clara and Sarah's lives. For the first time in 17 years, both sisters woke knowing exactly where the other was, and the sense of completeness was overwhelming. They met in the kitchen before sunrise, drawn by the same internal rhythm that had synchronized their lives during childhood. I kept thinking I might wake up and discover this was all a dream, Clara admitted as she prepared coffee with the efficient movements Sarah remembered from their childhood games of playing house. I've had too many dreams about finding you to confuse this with fantasy, Sarah replied, automatically taking over the breakfast preparation and the collaborative dance they had perfected before they could properly walk. This is real. We're really together again. Eleanor Morrison joined them as the eastern sky began showing the first hints of color, her expression revealing the deep satisfaction of finally understanding the mystery that had shaped Clara's entire life at Wildfire Ranch. Watching you two work together is like seeing a puzzle complete itself, Eleanor observed with wonder. The sisters' reunion had created an immediate transformation in their capabilities that was almost magical to witness. Tasks that had previously required detailed discussion and planning now flowed effortlessly between them, each instinctively knowing what the other needed before requests could be made. Their natural partnership had not only survived 17 years of separation, but had been enhanced by their individual development. "We need to address the Academy investigation," Clara said as they reviewed the timeline leading to the crucial review. "Now that we're working together, we can create a defense that demonstrates capabilities they never anticipated." Sarah's strategic mind was already developing approaches that utilized their combined strengths in ways that would surprise the hostile review committee. "They're expecting to find weaknesses they can exploit," Sarah said thoughtfully. "Instead, we'll show them innovations that make their traditional methods look obsolete." The strategic revolution over the following days. Clara and Sarah developed a comprehensive defense strategy that went far beyond simply responding to the investigation's charges. They decided to use the review process as an opportunity to demonstrate revolutionary advances in agricultural education that would make the Academy indispensable rather than controversial. Their first innovation was documenting the measurable economic impact of Academy-trained ranch managers on territorial agricultural productivity. Sarah's systematic data analysis, combined with Clara's network of graduate placements, revealed that ranches managed by Academy graduates consistently outperformed traditionally managed operations by significant margins. "Look at these productivity figures," Sarah said, spreading detailed charts across Clara's desk. "Academy graduates are increasing livestock survival rates by an average of 15% while reducing feed costs by 12%. That's not social experimentation, that's economic advancement." Clara built on Sarah's analysis by documenting the broader territorial benefits of their educational approach. "Our graduates aren't just managing ranches more efficiently," Clara added. "They're implementing conservation practices that improve long-term land sustainability and developing cooperative networks that strengthen the entire regional economy." Their collaboration produced documentation that transformed the Academy's image from experimental social program to essential economic development initiative. The review committee would face evidence that eliminating the Academy would cost the territory significant agricultural advancement and competitive advantage. But Clara and Sarah's most powerful innovation was their decision to expand the Academy's scope beyond individual ranch management to include territorial agricultural planning and resource coordination. Their combined expertise enabled them to develop programs that addressed challenges no single educational institution had previously attempted. "What if we propose establishing satellite academies throughout the Western Territories?" Sarah suggested during one of their late-night planning sessions. "We could create a network of women-operated agricultural education centers that coordinate resource sharing and innovation development across multiple states." Clara immediately recognized the brilliance of Sarah's vision. "That would make us too valuable for any single state to eliminate," Clara realized. "If we're coordinating multi-state agricultural development, we become a federal resource rather than just a local experiment." The preparation intensive, the sisters threw themselves into developing their expanded proposal with the same intensity they had once brought to childhood projects, working 18-hour days to create documentation that would astound the review committee. Their natural collaboration enabled them to produce work of extraordinary quality and scope in impossibly short timeframes. Clara focused on educational curriculum development and teacher training protocols that could be standardized across multiple territories while maintaining flexibility for local conditions. Her systematic approach to institutional design created frameworks that could support rapid expansion without sacrificing quality or effectiveness. Sarah concentrated on agricultural research and economic impact analysis that demonstrated the territorial and national benefits of women-operated agricultural education. Her analytical skills and practical experience enabled her to quantify advantages that had previously been dismissed as anecdotal or theoretical. Their combined efforts produced a presentation that repositioned the Montana Women's Ranch Academy as the prototype for a revolutionary approach to territorial development through integrated agricultural education and economic planning. Instead of defending their current program, they would propose expanding it into a multi-state network that could transform Western agricultural productivity. This is either going to save us completely or get us shut down as dangerous radicals, Clara observed as they finalized their presentation materials. Either way, we're doing it together, Sarah replied with the confidence that came from knowing she finally had her complete partner beside her. That makes all the difference. The academy students quickly recognized that something extraordinary was happening between Clara and Sarah, though most assumed it was simply the pressure of the upcoming review creating unusual collaboration. Catherine Wells was among the few who suspected deeper changes. There's something different about how Clara and Sarah work together now, Catherine mentioned to Jennifer Davis during their evening chores. They seem to anticipate each other's thoughts in ways that go beyond professional partnership. Jennifer had noticed the same phenomenon. It's like watching two parts of the same person working in perfect synchronization, she agreed. Whatever's happening between them, it's making them both more effective than either was before. The support network mobilizes word of the Academy's investigation spread throughout the territorial agricultural community. An unexpected groundswell of support began developing that surprised even Clara and Sarah, ranch owners who had hired Academy graduates began organizing to testify about the program's practical benefits, while graduates themselves coordinated to demonstrate their achievements. Margaret Foster, Sarah's former supervisor with the Women's Land Army, traveled from Colorado specifically to provide testimony about the Academy's impact on regional agricultural development. The Montana Women's Ranch Academy is producing the most capable agricultural managers I've encountered in 20 years of placement work, Margaret wrote in her formal statement to the review committee. Colonel Harrison Blackwood, whose ranch had hired 3 Academy graduates, organized a coalition of territorial ranch owners who formally petitioned the state legislature to not only maintain Academy funding, but expand it to serve additional territories. These women are revolutionizing agricultural efficiency throughout the region, Blackwood declared in his petition. The growing support network revealed that Clara and Sarah's work had created impacts far beyond what either had realized during their focus on daily operations. The Academy wasn't just training individual women. It was catalyzing systematic improvements in territorial agricultural practices that were being noticed by operators throughout the region. I never realized how many people were watching what we were doing, Clara admitted as letters of support continued arriving at Wildfire Ranch. We were so focused on building something that worked, we didn't pay attention to how it was changing everything around us, Sarah replied. Maybe that's why it succeeded. We were solving real problems instead of trying to impress people. Eleanor Morrison coordinated the support documentation while marveling at the network her daughter and newly discovered daughter had created. You two have built something that's bigger than either of you understood, Eleanor told them as she organized testimonials from throughout the Western Territories. Her personal revelation strategy as the review date approached. Clara and Sarah made a strategic decision that would either strengthen their defense immeasurably or provide their opponents with powerful ammunition for attack. They decided to reveal their twin relationship publicly as evidence of the kind of natural partnerships that their educational approach was designed to foster. Our reunion demonstrates exactly what the Academy is meant to accomplish, Clara explained. Their reasoning to Eleanor. We're teaching women to develop collaborative relationships that enhance everyone's capabilities rather than competing for limited opportunities. Sarah agreed with the strategy despite recognizing its risks. If we present our relationship as evidence, that women working together can achieve more than individuals working alone. It reinforces everything our curriculum teaches about cooperative problem solving. Their decision to publicize their twin relationship required careful presentation to avoid appearing calculated or manipulative. They decided to frame it as a recent discovery that had enhanced their already effective partnership rather than as the foundation of their collaboration. The story they would tell was completely truthful, that Sarah had discovered their relationship while helping prepare their defense documentation, and that their reunion had demonstrated the power of natural partnerships that their educational methods were designed to identify and develop among all students. We're not asking for sympathy. Because we were separated as children, Clara explained to the students they trusted with their story. We're demonstrating that the collaborative methods we teach can create partnerships as effective as the ones nature provides. The Academy students' reaction to learning about Clara and Sarah's relationship was overwhelmingly positive and supportive. Rather than seeing their instructor's twin connection as something that set them apart, students recognized it as proof that the collaborative methods they were learning could create extraordinary results. "No wonder you two work together so well," Catherine Wells exclaimed when Clara and Sarah explained their relationship. "But watching you teach has shown all of us how to develop similar partnerships with each other. That's what makes this program special. It creates connections between people who didn't know they could work together so effectively." The final preparations, the week before the review committee's arrival, Clara and Sarah completed their preparations with a confidence that came from knowing they had created something genuinely revolutionary that could withstand any honest scrutiny. Their documentation was comprehensive, their innovations were demonstrably effective, and their vision for expansion was both ambitious and practical. More importantly, they faced the challenge as true partners for the first time in their adult lives, combining their individual strengths into something more powerful than either could have achieved alone. Clara's systematic educational expertise and Sarah's innovative problem-solving abilities created a partnership that was perfectly suited for defending and expanding their revolutionary work. "Whatever happens with this review, we've already succeeded in the most important way," Sarah told Clara as they made final adjustments to their presentation materials. "We found each other, and we've proven that working together makes us both stronger than we ever were apart." "The Academy brought us back together," Clara replied, "and now our partnership will ensure it continues helping other women discover their own collaborative potential." The review committee would arrive in 3 days, expecting to find a questionable experimental program that threatened traditional agricultural structures. Instead, they would encounter a revolutionary educational system operated by twin sisters, whose reunion had demonstrated the extraordinary power of true partnership and whose vision for territorial development could transform the entire Western agricultural economy. Clara and Sarah were ready to fight for everything they had built, but more importantly, they were ready to build everything they had dreamed of during 17 years of separation. The foundation of loss had finally been transformed into a foundation of unlimited possibility. The review committee arrives. The Montana State Agricultural Review Committee arrived at Wildfire Ranch on a sweltering August morning in 1920, their black automobiles kicking up clouds of dust as they approached the Academy buildings. The 5-member committee consisted of traditional ranchers, conservative legislators, and agricultural officials who had come prepared to find evidence that would justify shutting down what they considered a dangerous social experiment. Committee Chairman Herbert Thornton emerged from the lead vehicle with the bearing of a man accustomed to imposing his will on situations he found objectionable. At 62, Thornton represented the old guard of Montana ranching interests who viewed women's independence as a threat to established social and economic order. "Miss Morrison," Thornton addressed Clara with barely concealed condescension. As the committee assembled near the ranch house, "We're here to conduct a thorough evaluation of your educational enterprise. I trust you have all requested documentation prepared for our review." Clara and Sarah stood together on the ranch house porch, presenting a united front that immediately commanded attention despite the committee's preconceptions. Both women were dressed professionally but practically, their bearing confident without being confrontational, their presence suggested incompetence that was difficult to dismiss casually. "Chairman Thornton," Clara replied with perfect politeness that masked steely determination, "we have prepared comprehensive documentation that we believe will exceed your review requirements. We've also arranged practical demonstrations of our educational methods and their measurable results." Sarah stepped forward with a thick portfolio containing their revolutionary defense materials. "Gentlemen, we're pleased to present evidence that the Montana Women's Ranch Academy has developed innovations in agricultural education that could transform territorial economic development throughout the American West." The committee members exchanged skeptical glances, clearly unprepared for the professional confidence and ambitious scope that Clara and Sarah were projecting. They had expected to find a defensive program trying to justify its continued existence, not an operation proposing to revolutionize territorial agricultural policy. The presentation, that stunned, formal presentation took place in the Academy's main classroom, which Clara and Sarah had transformed into a comprehensive exhibition of their program's achievements and innovations. Charts, maps, statistical analyses, and testimonials covered every available surface, creating a visual impact that immediately challenged the committee's assumptions. "Gentlemen," Clara began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had mastered every detail of her subject, "the Montana Women's Ranch Academy has achieved measurable improvements in agricultural productivity that represent significant economic advancement for our territory and the broader Western region." Sarah took over seamlessly, presenting economic data that none of the committee members had anticipated encountering. Academy-trained ranch managers have increased average livestock survival rates by 15% while reducing operational costs by 12% across 43 different ranch operations spanning 5 territories. The statistical presentation continued for 30 minutes, with Clara and Sarah alternating speakers in perfect coordination that demonstrated the collaborative methods they taught. Every claim was supported by detailed documentation. Every projection was based on verified performance data, and every recommendation addressed practical challenges the committee members recognized from their own agricultural experience. Committee member James Richardson, himself a successful rancher, found himself genuinely impressed despite his initial skepticism. "These productivity improvements are remarkable," Richardson admitted. "How do you account for such consistent success across different operations and territories?" "Our educational methods emphasize adaptive problem-solving and collaborative management techniques that enhance natural capabilities rather than imposing rigid procedures," Clara explained. "Women tend to approach agricultural challenges systematically and cooperatively, leading to innovations that individual operators might not discover alone." Sarah built on Clara's explanation with practical examples that resonated with the committee's own experience. "For instance, our graduates consistently implement cross-training programs that ensure ranch operations can continue effectively even when key personnel are unavailable. This redundancy creates stability that traditional management approaches often lack." The revelation strategy halfway through their presentation, Clara and Sarah deployed their strategic decision to reveal their twin relationship as evidence of the collaborative partnerships their program was designed to foster. The timing was carefully calculated to demonstrate their point about natural cooperation, enhancing individual capabilities. "Gentlemen," Sarah said, pausing in their presentation of curriculum innovations, "we want to share something that illustrates the power of true partnership that our educational methods are designed to identify and develop." Clara continued their prepared explanation with the honesty that made their story compelling rather than manipulative. 3 weeks ago, while preparing materials for this review, we discovered that we are twin sisters who were separated as children and placed separately for adoption 17 years ago. The committee members sat in stunned silence as the implications of this revelation registered. Chairman Thornton leaned forward with obvious skepticism. "Are you suggesting that your relationship as sisters explains your collaborative abilities?" "Not exactly," Sarah replied thoughtfully. "We're demonstrating that the natural partnerships our program teaches students to recognize and develop can be as effective as the biological connection we rediscovered. Our methods work because they help women identify collaboration opportunities that enhance everyone's capabilities." Clara supported Sarah's explanation with examples from their student body. Catherine Wells and Jennifer Davis, both graduates from our program, have formed a ranch management partnership in Colorado that's achieving the same kind of productivity improvements we've documented elsewhere. Their success isn't based on family relationships, it's based on collaborative methods they learned here. The committee found themselves confronting evidence that challenged their fundamental assumptions about women's capabilities and the nature of effective agricultural management. Rather than promoting radical social change, the Academy was demonstrating practical innovations that improved measurable results. The practical demonstration. The afternoon portion of the review consisted of practical demonstrations that allowed committee members to observe Academy students managing actual ranch operations under challenging conditions. Clara and Sarah had arranged scenarios that would test their students' capabilities while showcasing the collaborative methods that made their program distinctive. The first demonstration involved managing a simulated emergency where a lightning strike had injured several cattle and damaged essential equipment during the peak of calving season. Academy students were required to coordinate medical treatment, equipment repairs, and operational continuity while maintaining safety protocols and minimizing economic losses. Committee members watched in amazement as the students implemented systematic response procedures that addressed every aspect of the CALVA crisis simultaneously. Rather than panicking or competing for authority, they formed collaborative teams that utilized each person's strengths while ensuring comprehensive coverage of all necessary tasks. "This is remarkable coordination," observed Dr. Patricia Mitchell, the committee's agricultural education specialist. "These students are managing complex operations with more systematic effectiveness than I typically see in experienced professionals." The second demonstration showcased innovative livestock management techniques that Academy graduates had developed through collaborative problem-solving approaches. Students presented improvements in feeding efficiency, health monitoring, and breeding optimization that reflected the kind of analytical thinking Clara and Sarah's program emphasized. "Where did these innovations come from?" asked Richardson, clearly impressed by the practical value of what he was observing. "Our students developed them through collaborative research projects that encourage systematic experimentation," Clara explained. "When women work together to solve problems, they often discover approaches that individuals working alone might not consider." Sarah added context that emphasized the broader implications of their educational approach. "These innovations aren't just theoretical exercises, they're practical improvements that our graduates implement in their subsequent positions, creating measurable benefits for the entire territorial agricultural economy." The federal expansion proposal, climax of Clara and Sarah's presentation, was their proposal for expanding the Academy into a multi-territorial agricultural development network that would coordinate educational programs, research initiatives, and resource sharing across the entire American West. "Gentlemen," Clara announced as she unveiled maps and organizational charts that outlined their vision, "we propose transforming the Montana Women's Ranch Academy into the foundation for a federal agricultural development program that could revolutionize Western territorial productivity and settlement patterns." The scope of their proposal was breathtaking in its ambition and practical in its implementation strategies. Sarah presented detailed plans for establishing satellite academies in Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, Oregon, and California, each adapted to local conditions while maintaining coordinated standards and shared innovations. This network would create the first systematic approach to Western agricultural development that utilizes the full capabilities of territorial populations, Sarah explained. By training women to manage agricultural operations effectively, we can double the available pool of qualified ranch managers while implementing collaborative methods that improve overall productivity. Clara outlined the economic benefits that such a network could provide. Federal investment in this expansion would generate agricultural improvements worth millions of dollars annually, while creating stable settlement patterns that support territorial development and eventual statehood for the entire region. The committee found themselves confronting a proposal that transformed their mission from evaluating a questionable local program to considering a revolutionary approach to territorial development that could influence national expansion policies. Chairman Thornton struggled to process the magnitude of what Clara and Sarah were proposing. This goes far beyond the scope of our review mandate, he pointed out. We're here to evaluate a single educational program, not redesign territorial agricultural policy. With respect, Chairman Thornton, Sarah replied diplomatically, you're here to evaluate whether the Montana Women's Ranch Academy serves territorial interests effectively. We're demonstrating that it has the potential to serve national interests in ways that exceed anything currently available. The unexpected outcome, the committee's final deliberations took place that evening in the Pine Ridge Hotel, where heated discussions continued past midnight as members struggled to reconcile their initial skepticism with the overwhelming evidence of the Academy's effectiveness. And potential. Dr. Mitchell emerged as the strongest advocate for not only maintaining the Academy's funding, but supporting its expansion proposal. This program has achieved documented results that exceed anything I've encountered in 20 years of agricultural education evaluation, she argued. Shutting it down would be a massive waste of proven innovation. Richardson found himself agreeing despite his initial hostility toward women's education programs. The productivity improvements they've documented are too significant to ignore, he admitted. If their methods can be replicated elsewhere, the economic benefits could be enormous. Even Chairman Thornton was forced to acknowledge that the evidence contradicted his preconceptions about the Academy's value and impact. I came here expecting to find a questionable social experiment, he said grudgingly. Instead, I've encountered the most innovative agricultural education program in the territory. The committee's unanimous decision, announced the following morning, exceeded Clara and Sarah's most optimistic hopes. Not only would the Montana Women's Ranch Academy's funding be continued indefinitely, but the committee was recommending federal investigation of the expansion proposal with the goal of implementing similar programs throughout the Western Territories. The Montana Women's Ranch Academy represents exactly the kind of innovative thinking that territorial development requires. Chairman Thornton read from the committee's formal report. We recommend not only continued state support, but federal evaluation for potential expansion as a model program for Western agricultural advancement. The new beginning, the months following the committee's endorsement, brought transformations that exceeded even Clara and Sarah's ambitious visions. Federal agricultural officials arrived to study their methods. Territorial governments requested consultation on establishing similar programs, and applications from prospective students increased exponentially. But the most significant change was the sisters' recognition that their reunion had created possibilities they were only beginning to explore. Their partnership combined Clara's systematic educational expertise with Sarah's innovative problem-solving abilities in ways that generated constant new opportunities for service and advancement. We spent 17 years preparing for this moment without knowing it, Clara observed as they reviewed expansion plans that would establish them as leaders in territorial agricultural development. Every challenge we faced alone made us stronger. Partners when we finally came back together. Sarah agreed while adding her own perspective on their remarkable journey. We always knew we were incomplete without each other, but I never imagined that our reunion would create opportunities to help so many other women discover their own potential for collaboration and success. The Montana Women's Ranch Academy had evolved from Clara's desperate attempt to save Wildfire Ranch into a revolutionary educational institution that was influencing territorial development policies throughout the American West. But more importantly for Clara and Sarah, it had become the vehicle that brought them back together and the foundation for building everything they had dreamed of during their years of separation. Eleanor Morrison watched her adopted daughter and newly discovered daughter planning their expanded operations with the deep satisfaction of seeing a family complete itself while creating benefits that extended far beyond personal happiness. "Your father would be so proud of what you've accomplished," Eleanor told Clara during one of their evening conversations. "But I think he would be most proud that you never stopped believing you would find Sarah again." As 1920 drew to a close, Clara and Sarah stood on the porch of Wildfire Ranch, looking out over the Montana landscape that had become the backdrop for their reunion and the launching point for their shared future. The academy buildings housed students from throughout the Western Territories, all learning collaborative methods that would enhance their own capabilities while improving agricultural productivity across the expanding frontier. The twin sisters, who had been torn apart by circumstances beyond their control, had not only found each other again, but had transformed their reunion into a force for change that would benefit countless others facing similar challenges. Their story had become proof that determination, hope, and the unbreakable bonds of family could overcome any obstacle and create possibilities beyond anyone's imagination. The foundation of loss that had shaped their childhood had been transformed into a foundation of unlimited potential that would influence the development of the American West for generations to come. Clara and Sarah Thompson Morrison had found each other, and in doing so, they had discovered that their greatest dreams were only the beginning of what they could accomplish together. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.